Hello and welcome to Friends with Deficits. I'm your host, Adam Sultan, and my next friend is Seth White. Seth White is an artist, a sculptor, a writer, and an interesting guy. In fact, when he reached out to me to talk, he said, it definitely won't be boring, and it wasn't. So without any further ado, let's get started. Here's Seth White.
I suppose we could start from now and possibly work our way back. I mean, we could bounce around.
Okay.
Well, let's just get the ugly mechanisms out there.
Let me ask you this: how's
Sure.
your 2021 been, or 2020?
I think as far as 2020 and 2021 go, I've had a much better apocalypse than everyone else. I mean, I always thought at the end of the world I'd get my shit together, and it was more than prophecy. Things are working out better for me than they ever had my entire existence. So that's kind of sweet. I mean, it's just at the detriment of everyone else in humanity, but, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
I've gotten lots of work done. I got into UT, which is totally unexpected, mind blower. I mean, I feel like an old bastard running around there. I mean, most of the kids in the classes I'm in are my kids' age, which is only a little awkward.
What are you studying?
I'm studying art, sculpture primarily. I've gone through a lot of different arts. I've never been as good an illustrator as I wanted to be, to the point where I just stopped doing any sort of physical art for a while. First art I think I really felt any sort of confidence in was makeup. I started doing makeup for the Z-Rock Haunted House in Seattle when I was 15 years old. I had to take a $500 makeup course, and I happened to have $500 because I was working as a locksmith's apprentice. But the gig ended up being $100 a night, which is great for any kind of job. And when you're 15 years old, that's a lot of bread.
Yeah.
And it was makeup and acting in a haunted house. And I was able to take a lot of that makeup skill to painting, sculpture. It translated very well.
You said you wanted to start from here and go backwards. So other than things being well, what else is going on?
I guess maybe we're going forwards now. I got passed around from a lot of family members for a while. Became a ward of the state, which was fun. And I didn't stick with that for very long. Just struck out on my own and ultimately ended up in Gary Job Corps in San Marcos, which is a great place where they dump kids. It's really good training for either joining the army or going to prison.
Why were you passed around?
Well, my father, I don't know, he was a brilliant man, a mechanical genius, well-read, Vietnam vet. I mean, he was pretty psycho. I didn't realize the first time I met him when he was getting out of prison. He was getting out of prison for rape. And, trained me on all kinds of military tactics from when I was really small. And, he used to hang out with the bikers and the hippies and stuff like that. When I was a kid, I got diagnosed with ADHD and got prescribed Ritalin. And I never got any of it because my dad and his girlfriend went straight for the Ritalin. They're like, he's getting high class speed. We're just going to take this. And so I'd never gotten any treatment, and I'd been real paranoid about any kind of treatment. I was very isolationist as a kid. I mean, I was well-read, but didn't speak. I think I shocked my parents when I spoke because I didn't talk a lot. I never read kids' books. I mean, I was anti-fiction in kindergarten. I would only read science books and serious things. I didn't lighten up for many, many, many years, probably not until my 20s, really. Whenever someone would say something to me as a small child, I'd usually freeze up, and then they'd have to push me. And my dad was real fond of telling his biker buddies that he beat the autism out of me. They wanted me to have snap, And so whenever I'd pause, I'd get hit, and so I ended up getting a response to that, and which it goes to a certain point where it just becomes pure rage, and anxiety goes to anger instead, which took a lot of work to move away from. My parents, I mean, they sold drugs in sort of a fun capacity in the late 70s, early 80s, but By 1986, when he started manufacturing his own meth in Niederwald, and then a lot of stuff went wrong. He shipped us off to an aunt in California, then showed up there with his girlfriend, a 16-year-old girlfriend, a dog, and took me and my sister, and we hitchhiked from LA back to Austin. We were here for like 2 weeks. He ended up, I don't know, I heard he killed some people. I know he tore down somebody's crop and sold that, and then we all ended up in South Dakota, where that's where I finally ended up in like the foster system, child system. And at some point got handed back to my mom, who was equally crazy. She'd also married a smuggler who just had a kid and was reformed, but it was still the same psycho stuff. I went and tried to live with aunt who moved from California to Seattle, but she was a Marine Corps drill instructor during the 60s and 70s and was equally insane. So I just started hanging out with people I met, sleeping on couches, signed on with a Mormon family for a while because they seemed normal to me at the time, not knowing what normal was. And since I usually had no parental support, there was no under resource too, and I changed schools constantly. I think after the second grade in Buda, I didn't spend an entire year at the same school ever. And like when I was 15, yeah, I had to have an address and a legal guardian to be able to go to high school in Texas. I was staying in Dripping Springs with a friend of mine, and they wouldn't let me in, which is why I signed up for Job Corps, where I was able to go get a GED.
What is Job Corps exactly?
It's America's secret orphanage. It's a government program that was created by LBJ to give students work training and give them a place to live and stipends. And it teaches like technical trades. Typically, when I was there, I signed up for cooking. And then I moved into lithographic printing and offset duplication, which they stopped doing immediately after I got the certification. I mean, it's like classic welding or auto body repair. I initially signed up to do the mortuary school at the Job Corps in El Paso, but that was a 6-month waiting list and I needed a place to live. So I just jumped into the one at San Marcos. And it's like some people volunteer to go there. I volunteer to go there. For some people, they get to go to Job Corps instead of going to juvie. And, you know, you got really good at cleaning stuff, buffing floors. I mean, it was a primer for either the military or prison. It made going to jail or going into the Army much easier. I mean, after I got out of Job Corps, I mean, there was no printing jobs. I was back to working at Arby's, you know, Double Dave's, Mr. Gaddy's, stuff like that. And I wanted to go to school. I wanted an art degree. And the military was just like, fuck it, we'll take you. Let's go.
It's not quite an art degree, but you know.
No, but it paid for an art degree. It's paying for an art degree. And ended up joining the Army. I signed up for tanks, which took me straight to Germany. Spent 4 years in Germany. Went to Macedonia. When I was in Germany, I ran all over the continent best I could.
Were you in combat in Germany?
No. I had probably the softest military deployment anyone's ever had. The closest I got to doing anything that might have been combat related was in Macedonia. They did like a soldier exchange program with the Nordbat Battalion. The Nordbat Battalion was the Swedish, the Danish, the Finnish, and the Norwegians. And they were all doing a mission together. And me and another soldier got sent to hang out with them. And I ended up getting attached to the Swedes. He got attached to the Finns. And in Macedonia, they took us straight up a mountain first day. And we did it was supposed to be a 20-mile road march down the mountain. But we ended up doing a 16-mile road march because we cut into Serbia. And while we were in Serbia, we spotted a Serbian patrol, which we weren't supposed to be there, but they didn't come mess with us. They watched us, but we kept moving. And then we saw a Macedonian patrol. And that Macedonian patrol was lost, and they weren't supposed to be there. And if they would have came across the Serbs would have killed them. because they were much better armed. So we actually had to go back, distract the Serbs, lead them in a different direction so the Macedonian patrol could get back to their house, and then we finished our road march. But yeah, that was about it. Mostly I was just in Germany, in Friedberg. It was the same, I was actually the same company that Elvis was posted in Friedberg.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, they had like one of his BDU shirts in a glass case in the office. It's pretty funny. And there's a lot of little Elvis memorabilia and plaques and stuff throughout the town. He had a house in Bad Nauheim, which was the next town over, but towns in Germany are so close that you can run from one small town to the next. And we usually had to do that just because in the Army you got to run. So that was fun. I mean, the Army, everyone has these horrible Army experiences. I think the Army was a positive place to deal with PTSD. I mean, when you show up in basic training, their primary focus is to either give you PTSD or give you coping skills for PTSD. And the drill sergeants, you could tell kind of early, they could tell, oh, that kid's had the shit kicked out of him. This kid's been screamed at. This kid's been beat up. And they've learned how to empower that. And for the people that have never been yelled at, screamed at, or anything like that, they get yelled at, screamed at, and learn to deal with it. The Army kind of gave me lots of skills for dealing with PTSD.
So you feel like it helps control your PTSD and at the same time gave you PTSD when you left?
Well, I already had massive PTSD before I got there. Like one of the examples, a soldier like thought it'd be funny if he yelled "at ease" like at 3 a.m. over my bunk, because when someone yells "at ease," everyone's supposed to spring up into parade rest position when the sergeant walks in. But the first thing I did was like land on his chest and start beating the crap out of him. And I had a lot of violent instincts and reflexes. If anything, the military helped me chill kind of some of that stuff out. And it also helped me it gave me a sense of humor for one. I mean, I was definitely a morbid, glum, dark little guy, but in the Army, it pays to be funny. And the dark humor goes really far and really well. And you develop a lingo, a dialogue that you can share with other soldiers. There was a sense of camaraderie. I mean, the propaganda was, of course, very heavy, but also ridiculous. Soldiers have some pretty morbid senses of humor. I mean, my roommate, he was in the shit. He was in Afghanistan and Iraq. And one of the best ways I can help him is by keeping him laughing. And usually that's some pretty dark stuff. 4 years in Germany, went to Macedonia, came back from Germany, and I had a fairly normal experience that a lot of soldiers have. About 3 years after I got out of the Army, I had a suicide attempt, which I don't even remember. I mean, I drank. I rarely drink, or actually I never drink now. And me and my wife had gone out with a friend, and this was 2003. I don't remember that year very well. And apparently, once we'd gotten back to the house, we'd gotten into an argument, and I put a dog chain around my neck and pulled myself up into a tree.
Jesus.
It was an interesting bruise. My stepdad said I should have had it tattooed around my neck. And I blacked out, and first thing I do is I wake up in Brackenridge. It was like, I mean, in my mind, I was walking out of a concentration camp, and then I'm in my little, napkin robe and caught up in the vending machines, and cop tried to get me back to my bed, and I broke his nose and dropped him to the floor, and then they strapped me to a chair and shot me full of stuff. And the next time I wake up, I'm in the state hospital in Ash. And I was only there about a week before they let me go, and really had to do a lot to put my brain back together from that. And then, I was just back out on the street trying to put it together. Half my face didn't work. I could not really open or close my right eye. My face had become kind of rictus. And it took a long time for that functionality to come back. I felt like I'd lost massive IQ points. But then I started writing and following this flow of creativity, and even got to a point where I was doing like automatic writing, where I was just writing page after page after page. And I'd take words and I'd break them down like crossword puzzles. It's like I'd write a word, then for each letter in the word, I'd write another word. And for each letter in that word, I'd write another word, and just filled up all these pages. Then I started taking it to a stage, and that got really weird. I mean, but my brain was not, I'd also been reading lots of magic books and lots of weird stuff. And some of them were like strange Mormon texts. And you end up finding out they're all about Freemasonry and white magic and blue magic, but it's still bonkers. I mean, I went from atheist to occultist to Baptist to occultist to atheist, almost became Mormon, to atheist, to, man, I'm just making it up as I go along. I mean, I've found out, once you find out you can make up your own deities and they work just as well, roll with that. I think all the role-playing games might have like helped that along too. Just sitting there and developing your own worlds and populating them and then ruining them.
Is that where you're at now?
A lot of this role-playing game I've written and I'm making a lot of art about, it's about a trans-dimensional bus stop. And I've spent so much of my time on the Greyhound bus, or just at bus stops in general, that it seemed like a promising place to work. And when you first show up on the bus, you have no memory, and you have to go get experiences to potentially buy your memories back. Or you can skip out on buying your own memories and buy other people's memories, or just develop something new altogether. At least that's how the progress of the game goes.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, you don't ever have to become yourself again if you don't want to. And a lot of it, I think, I mean, there's some fantasy elements, there's some science fiction elements, but I think a lot more of it comes from William S. Burroughs in a lot of ways than anything else. Just, his transitions, his reflections on not quite being in this reality. A lot of those resonate with me. That and the Dadaists. Dada probably had a big role in this. Surrealism plays a big role in it. I find those to be more safe. They're safer places to keep my brain than, like magic or religion or atheism were. Seven years ago, when I was going to the VA, I'd hit a point of depression and just misery that I couldn't cope with. And I tried going to therapy at LifeWorks, and that did a little. It got me going in the right direction. But a friend of mine, Linda Want, suggested that I go to therapy for real and embrace it. And I did. And it was challenging, and went through several diagnoses. And I also went through a serious physical study where they did all kinds of tests, MRI, and found out that not only did I have ADHD, I had massive ADHD, that I had massive dysgraphia and massive dyslexia.
This was 7 years ago?
Yeah, this was like 7 years ago. I mean, I'm 45 now. So this is kind of late for a diagnosis. I mean, I'd never treated any of this stuff. I'd never done anything besides philosophy, religion, studying various things. I was trying vitamin therapy, and I got myself up to what I thought was a fairly high level of functionality before I went and got a diagnosis. And even then, for like 3 years, I was leery of taking any kind of meds, mostly because of my family's associations with drugs. I mean, it worked real hard to make sure that I was not getting zombie medicated.
Yeah.
Which, is kind of a challenge with the VA. They want to make you a zombie right off. They just want to dope you up and shut you up if they can, because it's less work for them. They just hit the resend button on the prescriptions, and that's it. But I ended up getting a very good therapist who, because I had such a violent, traumatic childhood, it took someone that was used to being a combat therapist to be able to help me get through this stuff. I mean, any other therapist I ever tried, they're like all cinched up in the back of their chair while we're talking, and then I can't talk to them. There's no benefit.
How long have you been married?
I've been married since 1996.
How is your wife
Tolerate me?
tolerate? Yeah, how has the ride been? Yeah.
We've had our rough spots, and we've probably been through rough spots that most other people wouldn't stand by for. I mean, I hate to think that we've bonded on damage, but that was one of our early bonds. But we do truly love each other, and we've got great kids.
How many kids do you have?
I have two kids. I have my son Odin and my daughter Loki. They are 19 and 21 respectively right now. And yeah, they still stay with us. No, we're a pretty strong family. We've all been through some hell, but we all help each other out.
Do you feel like you're on the other side of that now, or is it a constant work in progress?
I am far past that. I mean, I'm probably in a better place now than I have ever been in my entire life. My therapist shoved me out the door. She's like, "I've kept you a year longer than I should have just because you were entertaining me, but you don't need therapy. You need to go do something else." So, but that was 7 years of therapy. That sometimes more than once a week. That was one of the good things about having the VA in my pocket is I don't have to pay for therapy, and I don't have to pay for my meds because, I could potentially get shot at for a number of years. And we worked really close. Yeah, sometimes I'd be in there twice a week. Sometimes we'd stretch it out. And then it got to the point where I was only there like once a month or maybe once every 2 months until she was just like, we're not talking about anything about therapy. We're just sitting here talking, and it's nice, but we need seats for patients, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But she was a great therapist, and we worked really hard on getting my med balance down. I was anti-meds for a long time. I was scared of drugs. I mean, I didn't even smoke pot till I was like 28. For some reason, I thought hallucinogenics were fine, but I also thought of them as like sacrament. They still have these mystical ties in my mind as opposed to just being chemicals, which now I see more as a chemical base rather than a mystical base. I mean, but everything's like reflective on perspective. But actually treating the actual symptoms and dealing with the chemical imbalances and getting to a point where I could function, I didn't think it was possible. I didn't think it could happen.
So you're on meds continually at this point?
I am.
Yeah.
When I got out of my coma, I was going to MHMR, and they did put me on an antidepressant after they diagnosed me with major depression and PTSD. They had bipolar for a while, but then the doctors ended up changing it. They didn't think it was valid. But they had me on Paxil, and then my therapist at MHMR quit, went and got a job somewhere else, and they wouldn't replace they couldn't replace my meds. They had to get me a new doctor. And yeah, when those meds ran out, my reality ran out for about 2 weeks. It was bonkers. It was time warp strangeness. And I'd been reading all kinds of weird books. Scared my wife for a couple days, but I ended up dumping it all into writing and stage performance, and it definitely gave it some oomph.
Was your stage performance pretty out there or surreal?
I think so. I mean, a lot of my poetry was concise. It could be loud. It could be weird. It could be pretty nonsensical. I could give you a poem at some point if you want an indication.
Yeah?
Yeah. Let me take a drink and try to remember.
All right. What you drinking?
Water.
Uh-huh.
We've got a great little RO water filter, so it's really nice, clean, pristine water.
The good stuff.
Okay, here we go. Everywhere I look, I see how the sausage is made. I know the bishop's a crook when he flashes his smile as a blade. Well-embedded blue bloods wielding skull and bones for the reins may well have lain with their mothers and have gold bricks cast in their name. What I say to you may not make sense. It may frighten you or make you tense. If so, fret not, you are only dense. We've got a word for you, a tasty little worm for you, and when you are done and when you are through, you'll be feeding little wormy too, all brain tied up in little knots, crawling with these wormy thoughts, corpses walking down the lane. Necromancy, it's so fancy, little wrinkles such a schism, touch it up with botulism. In every little piggy knows that 12 is more when counting toes. Money feeds all nature's foes. Did you pay when you came in? Hapless sucker born in sin, homiculi, from a corpse I harvest dry. I live here forever, I go on never, God's only clone pulls the lever. They are creeping behind the curtain. They are making very certain silver test tubes bear the burden of a blessing with an urchin. Stem cells stem the tide of new life for withered hide. And stuff like that.
This is something I ask all of my guests. What would you consider, if any, the benefits of what you've gone through or are going through?
Perspective. I can sympathize with a lot of people. Well, it's one of the things that benefited me when I was working at ACC is I could talk to all kinds of students, and there's people that can't talk to autistic people. There's some people that can't talk to people with cerebral palsy. They can't communicate. And I've always been, I can communicate with those people, and I think that's a great benefit. I'm also looking at things a lot more suspiciously. I see lots of cracks. I can spot negative space really well. That's an art theory, but I think just the concept of negative space and helps me understand the space I'm in, which is negative space is like when you run out of lines you can draw the outline of, you start drawing an outline of around what you can't see. And then stuff starts to appear.
I'm hearing spraying.
Loki, could you stop that for now? Please? I'll, just a moment. It'll be just a little while. Kids just rolled in.
What's the spray?
Oh, she was about to make coffee.
What else would you want to share?
Well, doing better now than I ever have. I'm grateful for treatment, but it required me embracing it. I know some people that could benefit from treatment that would never embrace it, but I found embracing it actually helped. I was really surprised to find that something could be done about these issues. And I think there's hope for people to work with what they got. You got to work with what you got,
Well, I can work with that. I'd like to thank my guest, Seth White, for speaking with me. And I'd like to thank you for listening and invite you to subscribe to Friends with Deficits wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. You can also listen to us on our website, friendswithdeficitspodcast.com, and sign up for our newsletter. And if you'd like to be a supporter of the show and hear outtakes and other business of mine and our guests, check out patreon.com/friendswithdeficits, patreon.com/friendswithdeficits. Once again, I'm Adam Sultan, at ease.